Pete, as you know, it's already missed. Hold on. Pete, I got thrown by one comma and everything derailed. Here we go. Pete as,
Yes.
Pete as,
Pete as. Call me Pete as.
Pete, as you know, members of our Panic Pal Society will be receiving this episode just before Halloween, while free listeners will be receiving it just after. So with that in mind, I have a harrowing tale to share with you. Yes, my favorite word. It's about a woman who lived over 300 years ago, and she shares something very much in common with you, Pete. 300 years, and yet
what
might as well be yesterday.
In common across time?
Would you like to hear more?
Yeah.
Okay, because good. It starts a little morbid, but there's a real life hack waiting for you at the end. Okay, so her name was Hannah Beswick, and she was born in Cheatwood Old Hall in Manchester, England in 1688. And when she was 18, her father, John Beswick, passed away, leaving Hannah with a considerable inheritance. And do you know how she spent a good deal of this money, Pete?
I don't. Pokemon cards?
She did it to stave off her greatest fear. And it's a fear you know very well because you share it with her. Yes, Hannah suffered from severe tapophobia, which you talked about in the third ever episode of this very podcast. Do you remember what that fear is?
I don't want to talk about it.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about it a little bit. It's fear of being buried alive.
Oh, God.
See, old Hannah had a brush with tapophobia when her older brother John was about to be buried. Just as they were about to close his casket, he showed signs of life as one of the onlookers saw his eyelids flicker. He was further examined by the family physician, Dr. Charles White, was found to be quite alive, regained consciousness a few days later, and lived for many more years. I still don't understand how this happened so often. Like, are you alive? Like, just flipping a coin to see if they were dead or not. I don't understand. Anyways, this led Sister Hannah to dread being buried alive. So do you know what she did with that money? In her last will and testament, she paid that same family doctor after her death in February of 1758 to keep her above ground and check her for signs of life every day, just to make sure. And so that's what Dr. White did. He had her embalmed, and she remained on display with the goodly doctor checking every once in a while to see if there were any eyelids fluttering or anything. And then visitors could stop by and take a look. She became like an exhibit. She was deemed the Manchester Mummy. And it was only in 1867 that Hannah Beswick was finally declared, quote, irrevocably and unmistakably dead and was buried in an unmarked grave. That's 110 years after she died. That's how much money she has. That's how much this doctor kept her above ground. I mean, it's a little ghoulish. Obviously, it's around Halloween, but it's also a pretty good way to get around a case of the buried alivesies. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it gives me a great idea on how to use my estate, which will buy me probably an extra 3 or 4 weeks.
What you want, what you need, anything go, you get my love, 'cause you know it don't come for free. Every little thing you want, every little thing you need, keep it all for yourself, my love, 'cause it really don't matter to me.
Welcome to What's That Smell, a sometimes funny podcast about humans and their anxieties. I'm Tommy Metz III.
And I'm Pete Wright.
And every week we each drag one of our deepest, darkest anxieties into the light to share it, learn about it,
and hopefully laugh about it with all of you.
Reach out and send us the story of your anxieties to whatsthatsmell.net. Just go to whatsthatsmell.net. There's a little donate button. Click that, put in your credit card, and then go ahead and give us an anxiety. And we'll see if we'll read it on the air and learn and laugh about it with that. And speaking of listener submissions, spoiler alert, I'll go first. Peter, I have something to tell you.
Oh, is it harrowing?
It is not harrowing. It's something that I don't say enough. I'm no therapist, but I do know this. You're very handsome.
Oh, thank you.
And you're very good at podcasting.
What are we doing right now?
And you have much better lighting than I do. And this whole show only works because of all the behind the scenes work
I can
that
tell
you
a
do.
grift is coming up. This is a grift. a
And
long
your dog is
con.
outstanding, and your kids and your wife, they're just
Okay.
perfect.
And now it's overkill. It was
You do
fine.
believe me, right, Pete?
There was a line, and it's now been crossed.
So you're suspicious.
Yep.
Are you afraid I'm only telling you what you want to hear?
And that you want something.
Well, what I want to do is start this week's listener submission.
Ooh,
And it has to do
outstanding.
with what just happened. This is from Casey. Is it Casey's real name? We'll never know. But here we go.
Is Casey at the bat?
Casey is at the bat. And here's what Casey says. And it starts off with a bang. Honestly, I hate my brain for even thinking of this one. So I just want to sit with that for a second. Just sort of the self-loathing is just streaming through.
Stock and trade for this crowd. We're doing
yeah.
fine.
Jump on in.
Mm-hmm.
The loathing is fine. Okay. Honestly, I hate my brain for even thinking of this one, but in the context of a meme that said something like, quote, okay, but could you still see your same therapist if they didn't think you were funny? My immediate reaction was, quote, but does your therapist actually think you're funny? Or does your therapist just know that you need to believe that they think you're funny for your own mental health? That is a riddle, but I'm following along. That quickly morphed to, quote, can you ever know that anything your therapist says is their actual opinion, as opposed to simply what they think you need to hear? And I don't have a clue to resolve that one. Yikes, Casey, coming at the bat. I love it.
Oh,
This is a good one. This is a very good one.
So good.
I definitely have some thoughts and advice, and I want to hear what you have to say, but I want to start by telling Casey that once again, you are not alone. Sharp-eared listeners will know that I have been in therapy for many years with the wonderful Bonnie, and even though we've talked countless number of times, I still worry about our interpersonal relationship, as it were, even though we really don't have one. I know this is a little different than what Casey is bringing up, but I worry sometimes about not having enough to talk about, and I worry about bringing up the same thing over and over again. And I've actually apologized to Bonnie on more than a few occasions about talking about the same issues ad nauseum.
Oh,
and
that you're doing it wrong.
And worried that I'm like her most boring patient. To her credit, she makes it very clear that I never need to do that. But she thanks me for her honesty. I guess at the end of it, my crippling need to be liked extends into therapy. Which is super depressing, but on brand.
Wow.
But Casey is really talking about what their therapist really thinks and how honest they're being. Now, Pete, have you ever trucked in anything like this?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, seriously, have we met? Yes, I absolutely have. I feel like it is, for me, it's a little bit more maybe expansive, that it's not just my therapist, it's everyone that I know in my life. And
no.
I have a horrible back of mind, like child voice that's telling me,
I can't believe
they're not. You don't anything that somebody says to you or about what you do is circumspect, and nothing that you do is legitimate, and any praise is ill-deserved. Things are great. Things are great.
So it's like a sad Truman Show.
Yeah.
Like everything's on fire, not just when you try to leave town. Everything's always in
I'm a
flames.
definition of laugh, or otherwise I'd be crying. Like it's why this show exists.
One of the things that I wanted to point out, and I hope this isn't too completely obvious, but there are different types of therapy. But most cognitive behavioral therapy isn't based on a therapist telling you what to do.
Right.
Giving you tons of advice, because that's what a life coach does.
Mm-hmm.
Potentially, if you're out there and your therapist is just giving you a list of things to do, that's not exactly what their job is. A good therapist is really facilitating a conversation between you and yourself, helping you see past your own learned thought distortions or re-examine old routines. I know Bonnie ad nauseum has had to say to me, that is an old feeling. That is a very old emotion you're having.
What is that? That just means something that we've already worked through, or something that is like
something that I
you've carried
took on, that I've carried for a long time since I was very young, and it's no longer necessarily appropriate. It doesn't
serve me
or belong correct in this current situation. And so maybe it's, if you bring it out into the light, maybe you can discard it.
Does Bonnie do a lot of laughing with you? though? Not like this
No.
podcast. She's not
No,
Chuckles McBills by the hour.
it is not. She does do a cold open, which is weird. That's takes a good 20.
She does
That's-
she does do a tight 2 to teach you something right in the middle of your session.
She does. And then there's this weird, like she keeps trying to get me to subscribe to different tiers. I don't quite know. But I think she's spelling it TEARS. So because it's a conversation with yourself, I think one of the things I wanted to suggest to Casey is maybe it doesn't really matter what they think. It doesn't matter what they're telling you because really you're just talking to yourself. In effect, they're asking questions to lead you down the road so you can try to get out of your own way.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
It leads, well, yeah. I mean, of course, practically, when I just am just me, not in my living in my heart or my self-loathing voice, of course, that makes perfect sense. But the question is, how do you bridge the gap? Like, how do you get over the hump of actually saying out loud, it doesn't matter what Bonnie thinks. I'm learning about myself through this dialogue. Or how do you get to that point of saying that it doesn't matter what Bonnie thinks and away from the deeply ingrained voice of, God, I hope I'm funny to every individual I meet?
With Bonnie, as I said, I address it.
Yeah.
I don't let it just sort of, I don't just sort of let it fester. And she thanks me for my honesty. When I come on and said, hey, I had some anxiety about our call today because I don't have a lot going on. She's always very thankful. She's like, but I'm very glad that you did make the call. And then she goes, cha-ching, which is weird. No, she says, she's very thankful. And some of those sessions have been the absolute most rewarding.
Yeah.
Because it's like shower thinking. I didn't go in with a actual purpose.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of something snuck in through the side hatch. So I think bringing it up at least gets it out of my head. That makes a big difference for me. Because it's not misery loves company. It's just, I'm miserable. Have we met yet? I don't know. How about you? Are you able to ever do it?
Well, I think I go back and forth between like being able to talk about it out loud and then feeling just exhausted at hearing my own inner voice and outer voice talking about how I have to talk through it. Like I start feeling the sort of parallel anxiety of, I don't want to saddle my wife and friends and family with this again. I guess I'll just swallow it again. Like I'm part of they've heard it before. I'm not telling them anything new. It's just how I feel every day. I have to like shut up. And that is its own separate special gift box of feelings that I don't love living with, right? I don't love living with that inside my head because that just exacerbates the issue. Like I don't know that is certainly not a solution. That's definitely the hard space, that liminal space that I live between, like acknowledging out loud who I am inside versus who I present as. And try to present as somebody kind of with it from day to day, which is hard sometimes. I think, the fact that I feel like I can't trust, that my anxiety is telling me that I can't trust the things people say about me leads me to a lot of sort of like packaged responses, the packaged grace.
What do you mean?
Thanks. Like I know how to say, thank you. That means a lot. With a degree of sincerity that feels authentic when I actually am in my head saying I still am not really sure that they like my work or that they like what I've done or that they like me. And that's, that's the piece that's challenging that I feel like, and I wonder if this gets to anything that Casey is dealing with, right? That I feel like I am like when I tell my therapist that, I believe you, I thank you for that reflection, that I am still kind of lying inside.
You are. Okay, because when I have insights, and she always gives me credit for them because that's good looking out, Bonnie. Even though I'm like, you clearly did that. You just led me like a rat through a maze.
This is why you're still paying off student loans, Bonnie.
Are you just trying to fix yourself I mean, are you pretending to be fixing yourself just to make her or your therapist feel better?
Yeah, I think that's the swing, right? That's the part that is so challenging is and that's why that's why you need a therapist so badly
Right.
because you can't do it yourself and you need somebody to be able to see through it, right? You need
Right.
somebody who can look at you and say, "This is why you are struggling with self-appreciation because you're lying to me right now and by virtue of that you're lying to yourself." That
Right.
that not everybody is as cynical as you portray them to be.
Right.
Right? That's
Yes,
the
very
hard part.
much so.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you brought up family and friends, because another way of looking at this is family and friends, a lot of time, they will tell you what you want to hear because they're your friends and your
Mhm.
family. So maybe if your therapist is telling you what you need to hear, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe that's not something to be looked at as fraudulent. Because you have friends and family, they tell you what you want to hear. Maybe it's important to have someone outside of everyday interactions that can just zero in on the problem, not take it with a whole bowl of peat, but instead just be able to see what the issue is and find those routines, find those patterns, and try to bring them out into the light. Maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe not. I think I go back to this experience that I had that it was one of my very first client experiences and I carry this around to this day. It was nearly, it was probably 18 years ago. It
Okay.
was one of my very first freelance gigs, and it was one of the first times that I had picked up a video camera in a lot of years because I hadn't run a camera since I was for probably 10 years before that when I was still working in television. And I had quit my job and I was really excited to freelance. And I had this client that was fantastic and they were creating educational content. They needed somebody to go and fly around to universities up and down the West Coast and take video of professors teaching this thing, and they were going to put it online and do this educational content. And I had done some copywriting for them that they really liked, and I got this gig because it was a friend's wife who worked for this company, and my friend said, "Hey, you should look at Pete. He's picking up the camera and doing this stuff. You should send him." My first gig was to go down to Stanford and rent a bunch of equipment at a local video place and take that equipment, presumably knowing how to use it, and then set it up and record this person for several hours, like a day. It was a day job to go and video them and do this thing and send them reliable video back. And what I realized when I picked up the load of equipment that I had rented was that a lot had changed in 10 years, and I did not know how to use it reliably. And I spent the night before in the hotel room trying to figure it all out. And I thought I had a pretty good sense of it, and I could run things and push the record button and get all that done, but I couldn't lighting was tough. And so I ended up in a location that was terrible. And short story long, I did bad work. I returned to them objectively bad work. And even though I'm still in freelance and I'm still doing the same stuff that I have been doing now for 20 years since, that experience of having them pay me out in a way to get rid of me because they never used that, the 6 hours of video that I sent them because it was uncolorable at the time, still haunts me. And that experience still haunts me to the point that I question everything that anybody says to me about what I do.
But what did they say to you? Because you're describing imposter syndrome, but what was their reaction? Were they like, "Gross, here's your money"?
No, they
Or were
said
they
we don't think we can use this, and but this is not the video that we expected, and it is video that we're not going to be able to use, and we're going to pay out the contract, which was extremely generous, and I didn't expect it, and I wouldn't have asked for it had I not been just sent a check and never worked with them again.
But are you glad that they told you the truth? Would it have been worse if you knew that it was really bad, and then they said, "Thank you so much, here's your money, this is great," and then you don't know what the truth is? Because that's what Casey's talking about.
No, I know. But isn't that what's interesting, though, is that this was a real experience where I got the truth. But from then on, I'm in Casey land, which is, it doesn't matter what anybody says to me. I have such a low opinion of the work that I do that I don't believe anyone ever is saying anything authentically and truthfully to me, like about me, my experience, and the work that I do. Like, it is that therapist experience of, do they really think I'm funny, or are they just saying, do they really think the work is good, or are they just saying that to get rid of me right now? Do you see,
And
do you see how weird that is?
it's very insidious. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's, you were paying a therapist. And so they have a reason to keep you around.
There's an economic relationship.
Yeah,
Right.
unfortunately. Yeah.
I guess I can't tell that whole story just in a way to say, I don't think, Casey, that you're alone, and you're not
Right.
alone right here.
Right.
Do you have an
I
answer
think-
for me? Is that what your research is going to get to the silver bullet that's going to kill this werewolf?
No, I don't have an answer. There's no really, like, when you do research on it, it's mainly just about how some people wrongly go into a therapist looking for a life coach.
Yeah.
And for that, you want a life coach. Therapy is a gift you give yourself. And therapy is a conversation you are having with yourself. And so that's very telling that we both have so much trouble with some of that and worried what our therapist thinks of us, really, because we're just talking to ourselves. And that's just bringing up our own baggage
Yeah.
and stuff as we go along. So, I mean, ideally, you would be able to look past that and realize that their job is to not have an opinion necessarily about you and to try to give you that opinion. It's to just help you work through your own stuff.
Mhm.
And then it's a transactional relationship. And maybe hopefully there's a little bit of comfort to be found in that. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope so. But I also come back to the fact, and this is what where I kind of live, is that, getting to the heart of this issue is a practice. It requires constant, everyday sort of mindfulness on
Right.
this. And the work happens, maybe even not in therapy, but in every relationship that you have with, close friends and family, is to stop and say, out loud, or, in your head, like, is this person saying something to me that hits me sideways? Is it sideways because I don't believe it, or is it sideways because I don't feel it's true? No, I have reason. My self-worth is enough reason to believe them, right? I have to practice saying yes to this compliment. I have to practice saying yes to this every day. And that leads to, increased self-worth over time.
Right.
And I should,
Because it
add,
just becomes like a reflex.
yeah, it's a reflex. And I should say,
It's a
I don't
muscle.
feel like this every day. I don't feel like this. Like, I go through bouts where it's harder than other times, right? Like, I go through challenges when I question my own work. It's even harder to take other people at their word when they talk about it, right?
It's
When
compounding.
it's
because you're
compounding.
fragile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But it's real, and it exists, and it's every day at some level.
Yeah. One of the big things that I do that we have uncovered, it was really an insight that I had, is I am very good at filling the void.
Yeah.
When there is a void of conversation, I end up having that conversation in my head.
Right.
Or I imagine two people talking about me by themselves.
Yeah, and you're listening to them about you. Yeah.
Right. And they're nowhere near me. They're in another state, but I have decided that we're in a big fight. And
it kicks in so fast, right?
Yeah.
So fast, that spiral of imposter syndrome, or whatever. It's like, God,
inferiority. all of that
inferiority
stuff.
comes.
Yeah.
Of course, it kicks in so fast, and it's rough. And really, all they're saying is crazy.
So, Casey, I mean, it's just something that you want to be mindful of and work on. I wouldn't not bring it up to your therapist. Wouldn't not? Is that the best way to say that?
That was exceptional double negativing.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think that means, Casey,
George
you should
Orwell.
talk to your therapist.
I would think if that's something that because if therapy is a gift that you're giving yourself, if you're spending too much time during a session thinking about that, bring it up.
Yeah.
Your therapist has been asked this and many worse things. And so I would say bring that out into the light and see what they have to say about it.
Yeah, I think so too. If anything, it will change your relationship just a little bit with your therapist. Like there will be a different position that they
Right.
probably take in the way they talk to you about the things you're working on. For
Yeah.
good. Like that's a good thing.
But if they start to move in, reach back out to Pete and I, because that is also a hard no.
Is that what you're suggesting, that they might be a roommate?
Sure. I don't know. It's on the no list. I'm just saying, reach back out to us.
It's on the no list.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Also, everyone should have a no list when working with their therapist.
Yes. A no list.
Mine
correct.
starts with no whiteboarding, and number 2 is now no roommates.
Right. No excessive notes and no touching in the bathing suit area. That's all this is all classic therapy 101.
Therapy 101. Nailed it. Nailed it. Thanks to the Bible, we have the story of King Nebuchadnezzar II of Neo-Babylonian Empire, in which he is described as being driven from men and did eat grass as oxen. In another tale, Buyid Prince Majd al-Dawla made the sound of a cow and asked that he be killed such that his flesh could be consumed. These 2 men were reportedly suffering from a psychological regression written about by the likes of Carl Jung in the early 20th century. Today, it's a form of clinical lycanthropy, describing the condition of a human believing that they can transform into, has transformed into, or is an animal. In this case, a cow. There's a word specifically describing this subset of lycanthropic individuals, boanthropy. A human believing they're a cow. They might eat grass. They might attempt to live in a field. They might emit the sounds of a cow. Some analysts believe this is a form of regression of humans finding their connection to past lives, past experiences, and indeed, some consider boanthropic sufferers as those who live with persistent thought spirals or dreams of cow living, even though they may not manifest behavior of cows themselves. Maybe, say others, boanthropics are simply saddled with negative connotations of humans as cattle, eyes down, meandering mindlessly through their lives, totems of the emptiness that is the human experience. Moo humbug! You're not a cow, you're a person, and people only eat grass when it's lettuce-shaped and on a burger. And if you're people-shaped and listening to this podcast, grab your wallet and become a What's That Smell Panic Pal. For just $35 for the season, you're supporting the creation of 12 more episodes of steaming hot content. You get to join us for our live stream recording sessions, early access to each episode in your own personal podcast feed, our member community Discord server, and a collection of our new Season 7 stickers. Visit whatsthatsmell.net and become a Panic Pal today. Tom.
I don't know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, though.
Oh,
go ahead.
Okay. Should we talk about that?
No.
You've done a brisket recently. That was good.
I did.
Didn't you do a little with a sandwich?
A pot roast.
Do you want to talk about my thing?
Yeah.
All right. So as you know, as we talked about in our members only pre-show, I did finish my colonoscopy a couple of days ago. This is actually, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I am going to do this. Unprecedented timing for this particular show. Had we recorded this on our original date of Thursday, that would have been just an hour before I began the bowel prep segment of the colonoscopy.
Yep.
And leading to the Friday, which I actually had the procedure, and then and you called in sick on Thursday. You said I can't do it on Thursday. So now you catch me on Saturday, unprecedented Saturday recording session to talk about, now I have had the procedure.
Man.
And been through the process, and
got you coming and going.
You really, those kinds of statements, I think, are going to ring heavier in this episode, given the nature of the procedure. But I wanted
Did I
to
tell
talk
you
about...
why I couldn't record on Thursday?
No,
I had an elective colonoscopy. I just wanted a second look.
to knock
Yeah.
it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
They put me on the every 4-week plan. It was pretty recent for you, right? Like,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, and you were clean, right? No
Mhm.
issues, right? I was clean as well. That little bit of anxiety was gone, but that was not the most of my anxiety, right? The most
Right.
of my anxiety was, I'm a needle guy. We've talked about my needle phobia. I struggled a
Mhm.
little bit with the IV. That was not easy. But the thing that I found myself really thinking about was the anesthesia, because I haven't been knocked out. Because it was that space of being knocked out, of losing control. And I had that moment where I was like, the anesthesiologist was so nice. And he said, I am, it's really, I just, have you had trouble with anesthesia? Well, I haven't been knocked out since I was 16, right? 17 when I had my tonsils out. All right. Well, this is just, you're going to fall asleep. And in my head, I said, no, I'm not. I'm not going to.
I'm going to count all the way back from 10 to 1.
Yeah.
Show these fools.
He didn't even, and so they roll me in.
Mhm.
This is where things start to go a little bit sideways, because I'm already thinking the worst about the entire experience. And they roll me in. The anesthesiologist is the only guy who comes and talks to me before. The surgeon doesn't come and talk before because he's too busy, I
Oh.
guess. He never
Okay.
came and talked to me. Right. The
Huh.
only time I see the surgeon, right, the first time he opens the curtain to my little waiting room and he looks at me and he says, "Oh, hi," and then closes the curtain and walks away. And the
Okay,
next time I see him,
he's not a doctor.
next time I see him, they have rolled me into the procedure room,
Mhm.
and he's got his mask on, and they plug me into the anesthesia, and they plug all the leads and things on me to monitor me, and they kind of start rolling me over. And I've rolled over on my left to begin, and he gets right up in my face, and he says, "Okay, now I need to talk to you about the risks. There is a risk that we will nick the bowel and that you will bleed, and that will require immediate surgery. There is a risk that you will blah, blah, blah." And he was already a Peanuts parent to me by that point. And I thought, maybe you should have talked to me about this personally a few minutes before you rolled me into the surgery theater and plugged me into the anesthesia, because the next thing I hear is, "All right, we're going to send a little drip of the medicine to make you sleepy. So here you go." And I was like, okay, I guess we wave all this other stuff off and hope it's
What a
fine.
Not good way to do all
I
of
know.
that.
It was
I
just
had
so
a much
fast.
better experience.
Ugh. That's a relief that better experience exists, because the next
Yeah.
thing was my bullheadedness, which was, okay, it's he says he's going to do, I'm looking at the screen. I can start seeing the camera that I see that the screen is in front of me and the camera is kind of waving around as they're getting their instruments of probing ready.
Yep.
And so I can see it on the blanket that I'm on, and it's kind of moving around. And I'm looking at the screen, and I see my name on the screen, and I see the doctor's name on the screen, and I start counting myself. And the anesthesiologist above me says, "Yeah, here we go, just a little bit. It's going to make you sleepy." And I'm like, "No, it's not. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to just watch this screen, and it's going to be fine. And I'm not going to do anything like anywhere near falling asleep." Oh. For crying out loud, here it comes. Oh, God.
You could feel it.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I
was so
never
mad.
feel it coming. I'm counting down. Well, I don't even remember counting down. I lose time from before that.
Oh, okay. All right. So you lose time. Like what's the last thing you remember before you were knocked out the last time?
Give me your wallet. You
So
don't
not
mean
much.
in an alley? Yeah.
Yeah, no. Is there such a thing as a back alley colostomy?
Absolutely. It's back behind that. Yeah, I was going to say Jiffy Lube, but that's too on the nose. Yeah, no, I don't remember. I get carted in, and then we all say hi, and then they had me turn on my side, and then that's all I remember. I don't remember counting down.
Okay. Well, that's the part that I was really thinking about leading up to it. The part
Why
that
would you
I was
want
thinking
to be awake?
Because
you just
it's
you
no,
hate
no,
the
no, it's
idea of
not.
oblivion.
This is okay. So this is the anxiety. It's tomophobia. We've kind of brought this up before. It's fear of this sort of surgical environment, fear of surgery, and there are a number of reasons that you fear surgery. We've reviewed this before. Fear you won't wake up. Fear you will wake up. Fear that you won't be fully unconscious. Like those are the big three. Fear of pain is a close number 4, and all of those things are wrapped into about a 3-second window for me of the space before I feel like I'm going to be knocked out and the space after I feel like I'm going to be knocked out. And because I haven't experienced this in a long, long time, the weight of all of those feelings, I think, was very, very heavy. The first time I experienced anesthesia, I was curious about the whole experience. And I thought, I wonder what this is going to be like. I was, I was young and young and bold and brash and ambitious. And I took my brave pill and I was ready to experience anything. And this time I was like, oh God, does my wife know where all the passwords are? Like maybe I need to start. It's that little space, that 3-second window where my entire life is flashing before my lives. And then I woke up and they like pushed me around and said, "Hey, Pete, it's time to wake up. Pete, you want a ginger ale? Pete, I got a ginger ale and some crackers for you."
Yep.
And that was it. And I looked at the clock and I had completely lost time. And then I am filled with the experience of, oh my God, what did you do to me? Right? Total loss of control. Total loss of control. So I got through the fear of, dying, not waking up, fear of waking up, and all of those things. We should reiterate, those are very, very rare. Like dying under anesthesia happens less than 1 in 100,000, which seems like maybe not that much. Like if you look at a giant football stadium, a person is dead in that stadium from anesthesia. I think about that. Sorry for that one person. You chose to see a Pats game and you end up walking home, into a bus. You are twice as likely to die in a tornado in the United States than dying in a surgery from anesthesia. Die in a tornado. I saw Twister. A lot of people died in Twister in that movie, both from the event that it depicted and from just seeing it, because it doesn't age well. Yeah. And so I was just kind of researching, what is it? Like, how do you get to the other side of this? Do you remember how we get to the other side of this? Because this felt like, as I was reading up on tomophobia this time around, I found a preponderance of research that says you should do this one thing before you go into surgery if you haven't. And it never occurred to me. And I worry that we've talked about it, but I blacked out.
I don't remember off the top of my head. We've definitely talked about anesthesia. I told my graham cracker story.
Yeah.
But no, what is it?
It was talk to your anesthesiologist. And
they should come in and say hello anyway. See, I don't like your experience.
No. Well, and that's what I mean. My anesthesiologist came in. My anesthesiologist talked to me, but I didn't know that it was okay to ask these questions specifically to him, because he was awesome and he was very kind, and he asked me if I had any questions, but I was kind of paralyzed in the moment and I didn't ask. I didn't ask any of those questions. And I read this fantastic essay by wait for it, it's coming, I promise, Kathy Catella. Kathy Catella is an anesthesiologist at Yale Medicine, and Kathy wrote this incredible essay about dealing with the fear of pain, fear of anesthesia, all of this from the perspective of being an anesthesiologist. And she said, what many people don't know is that anesthesiologists are not only trained in the management of pain and anesthesia in the surgical theater, but they're also trained in the psychological challenges that come with being a patient and dealing with this loss of control and the fear. And you can call their office anytime leading up to surgery. They call it the pre-work, prehab. She calls it prehab, like doing there's rehab on the other side, as you wake up and you're rehabilitating out of a surgery experience, but there's also prehab, which is call your office, the anesthesiologist's office. They have people who are trained to talk you through this experience. And that was something I don't think I ever knew. And the way she talks about how generous they are and how much work they do to deal with people who are terrified of this experience, that anything you're feeling about dealing with the surgery experience, the fear of waking up, the fear of not waking up, the fear of not being fully unconscious, they can help you get to the other side of that. And they can give you the exercises that you need to prepare yourself for that experience. And I thought that was really, that was quite a gift to deal with that part of tomophobia that I thought was really, really special.
Smart.
Yeah, it was super smart.
Because while I knew that the anesthesiologist came and talked to me, I didn't know that I could have called her beforehand. And she was giving me, because they had to give me Valium for my Valium. I was so nervous because I have white coat effect that I think I talked about, I don't remember if I talked about it, but I was lying back and looking up at the hospital lights, and I had my own little room, and my blood pressure was through the roof because I was very scared, because I was like, oh, this is what it's going to look like if I'm ever really hurt or really sick. A dumb thing to think about. Shut your brain off.
Totally.
And so I couldn't calm down. And she was like, okay, we're going to give you something for your something. So she gave me Valium, which helped. And so they could give me full-on anesthesia. I just love that I had to have pills for my pills. Joke.
We had that exact experience. That was mine too. Like, I was already they had the blood pressure cuff on, and it was like, it was off the hook beeping in the background.
Yeah.
The nurse who was working with me beforehand was like, "You got a little anxiety about coming to the hospital, don't you?" I said, "Can you tell? Is that not enough of a note? Do you have to actually hear me say it? It's beeping
Your blood pressure
nonstop."
is beeping the theme from Axel F.
And so
from Beverly Hills Cop.
Totally. He had to give me an injection to numb my arm before he could give me the IV
exciting.
to actually put me to sleep. So it was that sort of meta experience. Like, I was physiologically compromised for sure during this experience. But the other piece is, I realized that because it had been so long, that gap between these sort of anesthesia experiences, these fear experiences, was very long. And I have painted a picture of what that experience would be like that was both sort of created out of pure fiction and watching way too much ER. And then 5 years ago, with being with my dad during heart surgery and watching the number of things they had to push into his body, like firsthand. And that has been my entire experience of this. It's like dramatic trauma, as told through television and movies, and real trauma as told through an experience that I likely will never go through, hopefully. Yeah. And is way off the charts traumatic. And ultimately, my experience was actually pretty good. Like, they were really kind, and I just didn't. I think I would have been saved a lot of that internal just distress by knowing that I could ask these questions of these specific people, and I just didn't. I didn't do it. I was too scared.
Resource. I had no idea that resource was there.
Yeah, and that they had that level of training. Like, I see anesthesiologists and surgeons and the people who are doing all the work as real, like, solid specialists. And I should not be like, that's part of my white coat anxiety, which is, don't talk to or touch the people who are doing this stuff, because you don't want to make them mess up. And
you're going to distract them.
Yeah. Like, any of my questions are going to have them take their eye off the ball, right? I don't want to do any of that. And so that's where I ended up. And so I guess in that way, this is a little recap, only because it's very, very fresh in my mind. And blissfully, I'm on the 10-year plan. So I don't have to do this again for another decade. And hopefully that will be the next time. I did get to thinking, like, what is the thing? So it's pretty recent for you. So I ask you this as a thought experiment. A lot has changed since the last time I was under anesthesia to this time. Like, one of the big ones is, am I going to implicate myself somehow as the anesthesia is wearing off? Because when the last time I was under anesthesia, coming out of it was a long process, and I was a real comedy factory. Like, I think I sang some Monty Python. I know I sang, "I feel happy. I think I'll see what's happening on TV." That's been with me forever. Like, I remember that. There's some sort of video of me, like, drugged up singing that kind of thing. This time, they pushed me awake, and within about 30 seconds, I was awake. And so that is an extraordinary change. That the medicine is
the runway is
so
a lot
much
shorter.
Different. Yeah. So what is the one thing? Like, is there one thing that you can imagine in 10 years that you would like future Tommy to be able to witness in his next procedure? Like, that they could modernize in future medicine?
I am an enormous fan of carbonation. And so if I could have a carbonated IV, I think that'd be fun. It'd be like a Willy Wonka IV. Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the scope, that the scoping itself is somehow
Right.
carbonated,
Sure.
sort of carbonated
real-
bowel treatment.
Yeah.
I'm really upset that you brought that up. I'm really upset that this thought experiment has led to carbonation, internal carbonation. That's not good for either of us.
Well, the thing, I just remember the thing that I was the most nervous about, the reason they had to give me Valium is the whole time I was like, does my anesthesiologist think I'm funny?
I know you're wrong. I feel the pain. You think I'm just some simple guy.
Thank you all so much for joining us this episode. This week's tune is Never Comes for Free by Captain Cubes. Coming up next week, I'm a real red state anxiety hog. Get out of my head.
Yeah.
I want to suffer alone and in silence.
I can't keep shivering when you keep talking to me and making me feel better.
Once a banana sticker is on my coffee maker, then all I want to do is
Just
peel my coffee
your
maker.
coffee
Yeah,
maker.
yeah.
Exactly. I've never seen a sticker lie to me. Wait,
Gross.
are you saying I wasn't doing a grape job?
I think I might be in a floating milkshake chair right now and not know it.
Right now.
Yeah.
And yet in your dreamscape, you still choose to do this podcast for our listener. Until then, I'm Tommy Metz III.
And I'm Pete Wright. Thank you for downloading. We'll be back next week on What's That Smell?